Geez, look what happened here, Bobby Jensen.
What?
They let us back into the Alive and Social Studios for another edition of the Lazy Gardeners.
Actually, today we doubled the amount that we've done.
Starting today.
So it's number 2.
Oh, my God, you're right. It's a 100% increase from where we were.
We keep that up.
This could be huge. This could be gigantic.
Oh, God almighty, we made it.
There he is, Bobby Jensen, and yours truly, BT, with the Lazy Gardeners here on the Alive and Social Network. Good to have you on board for another show, my friend. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We appreciate that.
No problem.
Yeah, we do indeed appreciate you on the other side of the, whatever they are, the computer speakers.
Whatever.
We appreciate you on the other side
whatever
of the
you're listening
earbuds.
to it on, we're very happy you're listening.
You know, I had someone ping me with an email at the radio station, and a friend, but I'm just saying they pinged me at email address, but I let them know that you and I had done our inaugural Lazy Gardener show last week, and I'm riffing on, how people listen with the earbuds and the computer speakers or whatever, but I love this part about the podcast world, and I'm bringing it up because some folks might not know they have it in their car if they got a newer vehicle. A lot of cars now have the Bluetooth capability built right,
yeah.
And some folks know it because they're listening to their iTunes collection on their iPhone or their music collection on their Android or whatever the case may be. But remember, the same functionality works when you're tuning in, bringing in a podcast on your smartphone. Just zoop that bad boy right into the Bluetooth and then listen to it through the car speakers. It's
much
just
better than listening to those other people.
But of course,
seriously.
But of course, really. I gotta.
We may have to play some music.
I do have to be careful about any
direct
disses when it comes to the radio world, because I do want you to tune into the show on Go 96.3.
I know,
noon to 1, and then after that's done,
there's a lot of others. 23.
Give us a little time on the Lazy Gardeners show here on the podcast.
There
exactly, or listen to some Twins baseball after the Lazy Gardeners show, whatever the case may be.
Driving home from the game.
Absolutely, I love the way you think here, Bobby Jensen.
This is working out, man.
I love the way this is working out, indeed. Give us a quick insight, because we threw some props out there to my regular radio gig there. What can we expect to see on some upcoming Grow with Care segments with you and the delightful, the lovely, the wonderful Belinda Jensen?
Oh, my God.
Because I know last week you had some multiple shots that day, some shooting out there.
Yes,
that,
we have.
You kind of put some different segments
Well, we did
together.
the Monarchs, and after we did the Monarchs, we went to Bailey's, and we really... The new thing is backyard gardening, small space gardening. Yeah. So we talked about some of the plants that they've come up with, like trees that are apple trees that grow no more than 3 feet wide and things like that. So that's going. This week we're going to a schoolyard garden, because I'm also on the Minnesota Schoolyard Garden Coalition.
That's got to be a really good organization to be part of, a heartwarming organization.
Thing, man.
Yeah.
And it's really good. Those outdoor, it's not just gardens, it's really outdoor classrooms, so we're going to go do that. And then I think there's some sort of home garden tour that we're going to be revisiting in the next couple of weeks.
Can people volunteer for that, the Minnesota Schoolyard Gardening Association? I mean, if they wanted to help out or teach kids or be a part of it, or see if maybe their school doesn't have one and they want to try to organize one at their nearby elementary school where their kids attend or whatever.
Right now we're putting together they have a conference, and we put that together, and you can come to the conference and learn how to do it,
how to set one up.
School can do it. There's like 6 or 7 different tracks that day. It's pretty cool.
I like that.
I was the MC last year at the Arboretum, and then, by the time halfway through, after I gave my talk, some woman from San Francisco, halfway through a talk, I just turned to the people next to me and said, "I'm in." I'm in. What do you want?
We're good. Yeah,
I'm in. This is a good thing.
We'll be a part of this deal. Cool. Well, it is cool, because any of that education that we can give the youngsters when it comes to getting their fingers dirty and knowing what's going on with the nature and the natural world around them.
Just get out of the house. Stick your hands in the dirt, man.
That sounded like my old man for a minute. When the kids learn about the nature, geez, that's good. I like
get
that.
outside.
Get outside. Get your fingers.
We need
dirty.
young gardeners.
Yeah, we
There's
do.
no question about it. Like I'll preach this all the time. Take a kid hunting. Take a kid fishing. Take somebody out and get them to the garden a bit.
Yeah, it'll teach them more about what they're putting into their bodies.
It's amazing when they see from a seed to actually eating it as compared to it doesn't come from Cub Foods.
Yeah. We had a guest on, Emily Soleil, on the Foodie Friday show this week, and Emily said that her little 3-year-old Lilu, everything that Lilu touches when it comes to helping mom prepare or dad prepare food at home, she'll eat it. You know, if she's able to participate in the process and touch the food and be a part of the food, that doesn't matter what it is. She'll eat it. And so that just extends further to the thinking and the mindset that we're saying here with getting kids involved in gardening and getting them involved in putting plants in the ground, harvesting those plants.
Right, it's not even, and it doesn't have to be food.
Yeah,
take a little tiny sunflower seed, stick it in the ground with a kid, and watch this 8-foot thing come out of the ground and a big gigantic flower. The amazement in the kid's face is just unbelievable.
Yeah, it sure
unbelievable.
Is. And then to watch the amazement as they watch that flower actually track the sun like they do.
Yeah,
and,
they move.
Yeah, they
turn.
move. They actually move during the day. Yeah, that gets the kids going.
Therefore, a sunflower.
We indeed have sunflowers that move, and we have a show that's moving forward with enough ridiculous riffing behind ourselves with just Bobby and myself here on the microphones because we've got a special guest here, Tom Tennant from Outback Nursery and Landscaping. Tommy, welcome to the show here.
Woo-hoo, thanks. It's an honor and a privilege, fellas.
Good to have you here, man. Very good to have you here. Tom's company specializes in native plants, and that's such a big groove that's happening with gardeners, landscapers, all sorts of folks.
Yeah, but you know what the wild part is? He was into native plants with the early 90s.
Yes, sir.
It grew up around him.
Nice.
I mean,
the whole idea of what people are doing.
He wasn't very hip a long time ago. Now he's like, what's happening now, man? Now he's the guy. Now he's the man.
So I would imagine, so mid-90s. I mean, you're celebrating your 20th anniversary this year. And,
well, I guess we are, yeah.
Yeah. And how about that? You know what?
I'm glad we reminded you of that fact.
I'm a little remiss in not bringing you cake today, Tom. I'm sorry for that.
That's all right, BT. Maybe next time.
Perhaps
you can come bring me
cake.
He
wants to come back.
Anytime.
Yeah, indeed. I like that.
He wants to come back.
Perhaps a Twinkie or a ho-ho will be in your future here on the Lazy Gardener Show. So 20 years strong, but Bobby, you bring up a cool point that even just 20 years ago, and it's hard to think that and believe that because there is so much more attention to native plants now. But back in '95, no, not nearly as much at all. Were you? So you were the guy sort of on the fringe of all that. What were you, the hippie freak that they were? Hey, what are you doing there? What that looks like a weed to me. I mean, things like that. Would you hear things like that?
A little bit, but mostly it's just been an evolution. I remember meeting Bobby down at the old Schumacher's, getting a load of rock and doing, traditional type landscapes. And
he was a landscaper first.
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up in St. Paul, and you see a lot of things out in nature. I got to go camping. I got to be in the Boy Scouts. I got to walk around my neighborhood. I always liked wildlife. You didn't get to see a lot in the city, but you could find it if you looked. There'd be places and things you'd see, and went to the Votech for landscaping, and there just wasn't a lot of interest in native plants. Sure, the sugar maples was on your study list, and certain other trees and shrubs, but they weren't really touted as a naturalistic native at all. And today, Bobby and I were just talking. There's classes in native plants at the Votechs, and whole courses you can take at universities. So I'm just fortunate to be able to be a part of that. And I listened to some folks that were landscape architects back in the day looking for the stuff they couldn't find at traditional nurseries. And, I thought, I'll take a challenge. And, it's probably kind of silly, but, I threw out a lot of native plants over the years people wouldn't buy. And, you get to the point where, you figure out what people are really wanting to use. And, every once in a while somebody writes an article, and of course you don't have those plants that year.
So, T, I mean, the palette from what the first grouping of plants that you grew compared to what it is now must have changed drastically. Over
big time. Yeah. There's, your basic shrubs and trees, and the prairie wildflowers, the woodland wildflowers. By no means can we produce everything that's native. There's so many, we get calls every day for some odd thing, and that's wonderful because people are starting to really pay attention and trying to make a diverse garden.
Yeah, their awareness has increased dramatically, right?
Big time. And They come out, and the people that used to come to the nursery as retail customers, not including the wholesale commercial people doing landscaping, has changed a lot, which is good. They're more needy now. When we first started, it was people that already had a penchant for planting natives, and they were very interested in, oh my God, thank goodness you're here.
You got something, anything.
Yeah, yeah. And they'd come out and they'd just be like, oh, you're the guru, blah, blah, blah.
Because you got something I only saw in the woods before.
It's easy to get a big head sometimes over it back in the day, because they'd come out and they'd teach me things, about certain plants. Today now, people are reading articles, they're interested in the environment and pollinators, birds and bees and all that kind of thing. And they've got a general idea, but they don't know. So our palette has expanded, especially in the wildflowers, to do those types of plantings where you can get the butterflies, the bees, the color, and then, the palette has to change for design in a landscape. People have small yards mostly.
As Bob was talking about here on the Care 11 segment.
So it's important to, choose the right plants so that you have that color and that pop all the time.
Yeah.
And it's easy to do, and there's, so many different plants you can use. And the woody plants are especially fun for me because a lot of people aren't growing certain plants.
So you mean things like dogwood, or what do you when you
talk
talk
about?
Getting more at like for instance, yellow birch. I don't know anybody that really grows it, and that's just a really super tree for a woodland setting or a backyard that has some cool soils. You wouldn't put it out in your front yard where it's hot and dry. But there's always plants for somewhere. Prickly ash, people will plant that as a barrier. And I'm not the scientist, and I don't know every little thing about every plant, but like, what does that bring? It's part of the whole scene. Prickly ash is a great plant. I had an auntie that used to prune it into a little ball every year because it had beautiful glossy green leaves.
Yeah, and you could shape it so nicely too. Yeah.
But you can also use it for security. They're so nasty to walk through.
Yeah, exactly.
So now, for people that don't know, we're talking native plants, but what's the reason people should choose a native plant, or how do they fit into the landscape now?
Well, it's basically, what do native birds, what do native insects need? They evolved around these plants, and if you can't put that in there, if all your choices is something from Asia or Europe, how does that confuse our native plants? One of the non-native plants that was planted, all over as a beautiful hedge plant
was buckthorn. I knew where you were going with that.
Yeah, you can always get 5 or 10 minutes out of buckthorn.
Oh my God! Yeah, but all the best intentions, I guess, right?
Exactly. So when in doubt, rip it out and plant a native.
There's no question about it. And what people understand, they grew up here. They live here. They can take our temperatures. They can take our droughts, the insects, all of those things that happen because they evolved over eons to be in this area. And, I'm okay with people trying stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And it's
you know
great.
What? And Bobby,
you should.
And you got to have some of that
stuff.
You
play
got to
a
have that
bit.
fun little unit out there. You know what I love to do? Obviously it's only going to last a little while, but I love to do this every year, is take a totally tropical plant and put it in one part of my garden where it just obviously doesn't belong because it's not going to last until first frost comes. It's gone.
Absolutely. That's fun.
But it's fun. It's just taking a little corner of it. But yeah, Bob, the ones that have been genetically encoded over, like you said, aptly said, eons of time to take on whatever the climate in Minnesota has to offer.
And I don't think people realize the beauty in a lot of them.
Exactly.
They just think, well, it's what I see in the woods. It's just that old scraggly looking shrub. And
if you put something in a place and give it room to grow and thrive and flourish the way that the shape would normally be without the competition of the other woods around, the other plants.
They grow to the shape that it's supposed to be.
Or that they can be.
Right.
And what's neat about a wild area is it's cats in a bag fighting it out. It's really a great match that these plants have to try to survive. My old buddy George, he was we called him the Lorax. He spoke for the trees. This man,
I love that.
This man was I mean, he had it figured out, and he said 1 in 10,000 seedlings is going to be a tree. So if you're growing trees, Tom, he says, do it right, give it what it needs, and if it's junk, it's junk. Park grade trees, you see them advertised at places, you need no such thing. If you're going to sell a plant, grow a plant, go through all that trouble to do it, then make it right to what it could be in the wild.
Give it its
and
biggest
they'll let the customer kill it.
And I think
I like George even more.
There you go. But I think you're right. I mean, when you see them in the woods in the competition, like you said, they're all fighting to survive. But when it's got some space and it's got the right location and everything that it needs, the right soil, the right sun, they're pretty beautiful things.
Oh, yeah, and you can find them in the wild, too, and you go, that's the perfect sugar maple right there, because something happened where a hole happened in the forest, and that tree just developed perfectly, and that's what I want in my backyard.
And that's obviously what we're here to do as lazy gardeners, especially, is to give that easy, lazy pathway to those great plants to flourish and survive.
It's the simplest thing.
That's what we're here to do.
Put in the right plant in the right spot,
spot, and then tend to it the way it needs to be tended to. Tom Tennant's here from Outback Nursery and Landscaping. You can visit their website, outbacknursery.com. You have some really cool things on that website, too. I want to throw some props to you that way, because these native plants and the cross-section that you have at the nursery and the things that you support, so many of those do support the other critters, as you mentioned, the bees and the pollinators and the other wildlife that's out there. But you put some really good info out there, because a lot of people, and Bobby and I have spoken about this, and Bobby and Belinda have on the care segments, that whole bee pollinator thing obviously is a big part of what's happening now in people's minds and what's happening in reality in the natural world there. And so to reinforce that and to put some of those plants in there, you've got a great resource for that on the website so that people can pick and choose and decide some things that they want to add.
Speaking of that, 2 weeks ago on Care 11, we needed milkweed.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
Asclepias.
The number one monarch plant out
there.
there.
But we needed, but you need the native one.
Yeah.
Guess who I called?
There you go, Tommy Tennant. Yep.
Tommy brought him up.
Well, you just said that a minute ago, Tommy, that you bring in plants. You mentioned it from a European perspective, but I'm sure there's truth there that if you bring a milkweed in, even from Arkansas, compared to the monarch patterns in Minnesota, it's not going to be the same for them. They want
not their food.
They want the milkweed that they're used to from millennia, eons of time, and generations past.
You're absolutely right. I think that things are local to a degree, and you go north-south, the zones change, and you go east-west, and there's a certain population of an insect that's used to. Plants are very, very, very unique creatures. They communicate. There's a lot we don't know about them.
They're alive.
And they're alive.
They are alive.
Exactly.
They are alive.
And if I'm gonna do something out of the norm that is going to change the whole outlook for the wildlife around there, it can be not the right thing. So if I have a choice to do something that is what these insects and animals are used to, that's the bottom line, I think. And not to say that I'm not a purist by any sort when it comes to being a gardener. Yeah, bring in some tropicals. Bring in some of these cultivars.
Try something.
Yeah, try stuff. Something. But the backbone of a great landscape starts with natives.
Right.
And you can do the whole thing that way, or you can pick and choose. And that's been our whole tack as we've been developing
20 years of it, man.
Nursery and landscaping. And Eric Olson, I got to mention, is our landscape design guy. He won't call himself an architect. He went to the U and graduated architecture, landscape architecture, but he'd say architecture for architecture. And he just got into native plants, and really he is a guru. He's writing a book. I don't know what it's going to be called.
Cool.
But it's basically about gardening with natives and
urban areas.
Yep, in urban areas, and or wherever, and he will talk about editing gardens, and working with it. And if you spend, he tries to teach our clients 5 minutes a week, 10 minutes a week, walk around your garden, identify the plants, pull the weeds out. And these things can be sustained for a long time because it is a non-natural situation in a garden where you're going to have to manipulate things a little bit. Plants move around by seed or by root.
Especially the natives.
Yeah, they can. Some of the grasses will move around, and you'll want them not there. And if you let it go for over a year, you're going to come up with a wild garden. Now, that's the lazy gardener way. And if that's cool with you, then fine. But if you want things set in a certain spot, then that's what you need to learn to identify things. And, I've got a garden.
But then again, lazy gardening, if you go out and do it
that's
10 minutes at a pop.
Just going to say that, Bob.
And just pull a couple of weeds instead of waiting a month and a half.
Exactly.
And then fighting your way through a jungle full of weeds. That's what it's all about. That's really it's the smart way of doing it.
And getting in the garden after a hard day on the highway or,
that's what you want to do.
You can weed with one hand, fellas. You can hold a cocktail in one hand. And you can weed with the other hand.
That's why we love gardening.
Yes, we do. Yes, we. I'm thinking there's probably even a holster out there to put that beer can or that cocktail in if you needed two hands at any given moment. For crying out loud.
Yes,
now we're on to accessories. That's good.
Well, just like that Felco shears that you got in that nice little.
I feel naked without that thing.
That's right. There's got to be something.
Yeah. I'm Mr. Green Jeans all the time in the summer.
Funny. Hey, let me ask something real quick, Bobby, if you don't mind. Back in the day, 20 years ago, people were not hip to a lot of this stuff, but some customers were. Where were they sourcing these plants? Were they, going out to, state forests, state parks? I mean, that's not a good thing to do. But was that stuff kind of going on?
There's been some of that, or people at lake places. I mean, you
could pull it off your own land.
Sure.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And. You'd always hear people, I got a tamarack in my yard. No one has a tamarack. But, my uncle back in the day, he was up at the swamp and, he pulled one out.
Brought one in,
and stuck it in there. And the interest in the native plants is, it's been more and more just because of education and things that you guys are doing. And the DNR's done a lot of really good articles, the Minnesota Conservation Volunteer. My friend Hannah Texler from the DNR, I can't remember her exact title. Sorry, Hannah, but she did a beautiful article in one of the last issues about urban landscaping with native plants and has done this for like 15, 20 years in her own little Midway St. Paul yard. We were fortunate to be able to be a part of it and help her out a little bit. And but it's a really well-written article on her trials and tribulations, and I'd highly recommend somebody.
And where would they find that?
At the DNR, Minnesota DNR Conservation Volunteer Magazine. I believe it was the last issue.
It's probably online.
Yeah, and I bet you if you just search engine those words right there, it'll take you to it, and then look up Hannah.
Yep, Hannah. Got to say Hannah.
Sorry. The land called Hanalei.
So take some of the people, they with their vision of a native plant is and what it realistically is. What are some of the choices that people can use in a small garden in front of in the city?
Oh, well, I think you got to start out with the shrubs and trees first,
right?
And then
the base, the bones.
Get the backbone.
You need the bone.
Give it the backbone. And smaller trees like blue beech or showy mountain ash, the serviceberry clumps or single stems, however you want to train them.
Now, blue beech is a beautiful tree.
Isn't that wonderful?
That's hard to buy. I know only one or two places you could buy it from. One of them being yours.
Yeah, and we've been working on trying to get our quantities and sizes up. We got slammed last year. We've got little ones now again, and we'll have some 3 or 4 footers in the fall. But right now we've got hundreds of little 2-footers, and if somebody's got patience, it's a wonderful tree.
It's a gorgeous tree.
Yeah, and
what about shrubs? Which ones?
I talk about hazelnut a lot. I think hazelnut is one of those plants because of the way it's propagated, the way it makes its babies is with a nut. It can't be ingested by a bird and pooped out acres away and spread around. So what's happened in the rural areas, for sure the urban areas, I have seen in a few urban areas in little wild spots, but it's a seed, it's a nut. Mm-hmm. And the only way, once that plant's gone from that area, it's gone. What happens with hazelnut, as an example, is the squirrels will bury those things, and they don't find them all. That's how it spreads.
Okay. That's the way it spreads.
Yep, either by a clump that spreads out in its own little area, or it's by the seed that a squirrel takes, 50 or 100 yards away. Right. We find them growing in our pots.
Oh, that's cool.
So a hazelnut grows about what sizes?
Oh, it in the shade, it can get 10, 12 feet tall, kind of spindly, and it won't fruit as much. But in the sun, in sand, I've seen them 4 or 5 feet tall just because they don't need
stay
to
more
go
compact.
Yeah, they don't need to grow that tall. But general garden soil, probably 8 or 10 feet, and beautiful copper red foliage.
Beautiful gray foliage.
Yeah, and that's one of my, I don't know what you'd call it.
Favorites.
One of my favorites.
Favorites.
And kind of a go-to maybe as well.
And the reason is not just because it's a great plant, because it's gotten wiped out from, you go out in the little suburban rural areas, and where they've been grazing, these things are gone. So I always try to, talk people into those things because, they'll spread then, and we'll have them back again.
When you say grazing, deer grazing is what you're thinking about?
Cattle mostly.
Oh, cattle mostly?
Yep,
okay,
yep.
Got it.
Back in the day, everybody, had shrubs in the woodland understories, and they'd run their cattle and graze, and that's one, if it got wiped out, it couldn't get seeded back in.
Sure.
So places like down by our nursery across the road, it used to be the old nickel farm, and I know there was hazelnut there because I find it little pockets, but wherever it was heavily grazed, you won't find it.
You won't find it, right?
Yeah.
Because once they kill that one, it doesn't produce anymore. It's not from a root. It's not from anything.
How far can a squirrel run?
With a nut in its mouth.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about pollinators. I mean, because that's the hot thing now. Bees and what we're doing monoculture-wise is just insane. I mean, there's nothing out there anymore.
Well, there's a super amount of people way smarter than I am and well more versed on that.
It is. You ain't so bad yourself, pal.
Well, thanks, boys. But, basically, from what I'm understanding, it's chemicals that are wiping out native plants in the ditches. The agricultural industry has used this new systemic insecticide, which has a chemical called neonicotinoid, and that stuff gets into the system of all these animals, all these pollinators, bees, butterflies, and it kills them. So there's a lot going on in the world that is directly resulting from, I think, the chemicals.
The neonic especially.
And also they're finding out that, when you read the labels, you don't apply enough for a bee to be killed, for an adult bee to be killed. But what they're finding out is the witch's brew of fungicides, insecticides, herbicides, all mixed up, those little bits of all those things, which separately, legally, they're fine.
Synergy.
But together, they are a horrible thing that's happening to all of these pollinators out there. And we wipe out weeds. I mean, every farm is, they've got Roundup-induced plants where you can spray the plant with Roundup and the plant doesn't die, but everything around is dead.
Yeah.
And I can understand it, but, there's a lot of stuff about this sustainability coming out that's saying, when you go back to the other way of farming by not spending as much money and not having to put the labor into doing that, you actually make more money and get better crops.
Yep, exactly. And the volume returns might not be the same, but as you said clearly, the time you're spending and the amount of expense that you're putting into that style of farming, you weigh the two out. But you may be producing less, but the value is more, and given your time put into it, the value is more.
And I think there's places where they're producing as much, if not more.
If not more, yeah, absolutely.
Because, think about it. They have to fertilize. It is right now a horrible circle. They have to fertilize because they don't fertilize, they don't get plants.
Yep.
But once you get the soil back to where it's supposed to be, you don't have to fertilize. You'll get a better plant and probably more, and they're proving it now, more production.
Exactly. Fixing that soil with the clover and just all the old school techniques.
Don't kill everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Even the ditches, they're spraying the ditches and, not to slam any kind of agricultural things, but,
it's okay. Slam on,
people,
baby.
People
okay
like to have straight, clean edges, and it cracks me out. I go out to see my brother out in Granite Falls, and you drive by these farm fields, and they've got from the edge of the field to the shoulder of the highway, and it's just mowed.
Yeah.
And they're proud of it, and that's great. But if they could let the native plants live, which have been sprayed. Now it's just turf.
Well, and aside from that, the habitat, for the pheasants, the habitat for any number of critters.
We thought we
absolutely.
could control it. I think we're finding out Mother Nature wins.
Yeah, and letting her win
not
is
a
a,
bad thing.
is a win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good way of
that's
saying
the
it, Pete.
problem. Yeah.
I
letting
told
her
the
win.
kids one day back at a little speech I did, and I said, Mother Earth, if you want to look at it like that, is like a big shaggy dog, and when she gets tired of us, she'll just shake us off.
That's probably true. Hopefully I won't be around.
Yeah, right.
Hey, it's time for us to put a wrap on this edition of the Lazy Gardeners. Now, I want you to put a little tease out there, Bobby. Next week, we're going to do this at the top of the show, so we're going to really dial in some lazy gardening techniques. Just a little tease out there. What are we going to talk about next week, Bob?
Well, I really think one of the things is being a lazy gardener, why do you put your garden 85 feet away from your house? So you got to drag your hoses and drag your tools and drag your butt out there.
Yeah, indeed.
So as far as I'm concerned, convenience is the best way to be a smart lazy gardener.
Whether it's distance from the garden or a distance from your next cocktail, the Lazy
The
Gardeners
refrigerator's
are here to help.
closer.
Indeed. Tom Tennant from Outback Nursery and Landscaping. Thanks, Tommy. Good to have your tea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks,
My
bud.
pleasure. Thank you,
You're
fellas.
coming back, man.
Yeah, please do. Please do. And again, a real resource is their website. So take a peek at that and add some of those native plants to your landscape, to your garden. And again, the whole bee pollinator thing and just everything about making the critters in this part of the world. That's what the whole native landscaping thing is all about. Native plants are all about. It's our part of the world. So reinforce that. Take a peek at outbacknursery.com. My name is Brian Turner. You can call me BT.
And I'm Bobby Jensen. You can call me Bobby Jensen.
Yeah, do that. And it's the Lazy Gardeners here on the Alive and Social Network. We'll see you next week.